Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome and happy Global Recycling Day. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. I'm here with Mr. Ranjit Baxi, the founder and president of Global Recycling Day, and my name is Zoë Lenkiewicz. I am senior technical advisor and head of communications at WasteAid. I'm going to share a few slides with you shortly, but first a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording this session so that people can watch it again afterwards, either via the WasteAid website or the Global Recycling Foundation website. Introduce yourself using the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And if you have any questions, please put those into the Q&A section next to the chat so that we can respond to those towards the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to make a start. I will give you a brief introduction to WasteAid. Just a few slides. So here we are. So WasteAid is a small UK-based NGO. We work with partners around the world in lower and middle income countries to help improve the way that waste is managed and get as much material as we can back into the recycling stream. And in so doing, generating jobs, improving people's livelihoods, and providing a healthier environment for everyone to grow up in. We've got a few projects that I'm going to highlight very briefly. One of them is in Douala in Cameroon. So this is it's a coastal city, 4 big rivers reaching the sea at the Cameroon estuary in the city of Douala. And each of the rivers is full of plastic waste. The picture that you can see here, the young man on the left there, he is actually standing in a riverbed. Okay, that's not a dump site or a plastic waste collection area, it's literally a dry riverbed. And of course, once the monsoon rains arrive, all of that plastic is washed out to sea. We lose the plastic as a potential resource, and of course, it's producing a lot of marine plastic pollution. So WasteAid in Douala is working in partnership with a recycling company. We've trained, or we are in the process of training, more than 100 young unemployed people to be able to get decent jobs in the plastic recycling sector in Cameroon. So that's important. We did a national survey with a local partner looking at how waste is managed across the country. There's a lot of informal recycling going on, which is great to see, but we were looking at really how can we help those informal recyclers really get the most value from that material, introducing systems and standards and helping people work better together. And finally, in Indonesia, on this slide, on the right-hand side there, we've been working with a partner organisation in Bali, in the village of Bondolem, where we've introduced a whole new village waste collection and recycling system that has reduced waste to landfill from 90% down to 10%. So those are some examples of the kinds of recycling projects that we're doing. I'm just going to, there we go. We also have Circular Economy Network, which is a very exciting project. This is quite a new venture for WasteAid. So it's an international project working in 3 major cities in middle-income countries, helping to improve the way that waste is managed. So, in lower-income countries, there's often no system at all. Middle-income countries, there is some system, but there's plenty of room for improvement. So what we're doing here, we're working in Johannesburg in South Africa, Guwahati in Northeast India, and Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. We're running webinars, courses and events, and we're soon to launch a very exciting innovation competition to encourage local entrepreneurs and people with great ideas to help make their city more circular, I suppose, where we're going to be providing business mentoring and some seed funding to get their project off the ground. So that's a kind of brief roundup of the types of work that WasteAid does. These are the projects that the countries where we are currently active. And just we're always looking to grow. The global waste crisis is vast, and there's lots and lots of room for improvement, lots of opportunity to make some really, really good positive impact. So on that, I'm going to end my slides here. There's our contact details at the bottom, and I'm going to introduce Mr. Ranjit Baxi, who is the founder and president of Global Recycling Day. So thank you so much for joining us, Ranjit. Would you like to introduce yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about Global Recycling Day?
Zoe, first of all, let me congratulate you for hosting this webinar, and more than that, to see the excellent work that WasteAid is doing in Africa and India. I think those are the actual continents where a lot needs to be done. So really proud of what you are doing. Today is Global Recycling Day, so I'm thankful to Zoe and everybody else around the world who are supporting and celebrating this day and raising the awareness. The question I think everybody asked me, why global recycling? What was the need for it? The answer is very simple. I have been in recycling business now for well over 35 years. And during this period, I have found that there is big differences, as Zoe has very rightly pointed out, like in Cameroon and those places, that there is such a big disparity between the recycling systems that exist in those countries vis-a-vis what exists in the Western economies. Do we need to reinvent the wheel, or do we need to share best practices with them? Do we need to help and support those countries or those economies so that their waste is utilized and value out of waste is harnessed, and we get recyclables, which we have coined to be the 7th most valuable resource on planet Earth. And so that was my driver. And then when you travel around Africa, India, and other countries, you will find that one of the biggest problem is, you look at West Mountains, they are growing at such an alarming rate. And the kind of life those rake pickers are having around the West Mountains, you see little children working there, trying to make life out of picking rubbish, middle-aged people, suffering from various illnesses who won't have a longer lifespan. So lots of things are happening there. So I feel it's really duty of us, the civil society, to try and reduce these West Mountains. And then you go to this 2030 United Nations Sustainable Goals, and one of the vision is to reduce, landfill waste, etc., etc. So I said, how do I connect the word together? And as Zoe, you very rightly picked what I always say is, recycling is an untold story. And why I say untold story is exactly for this reason, that around the globe, people still do not understand what value is there within the recycling waste. What can we do? How can it be done? And what contribution it makes for the good of the planet. I mean, the figures you probably must have read about it, and you must have spoken in a global presentation so many times, Zoe, is recycling saves something like 700 to 800 million tons of CO2 emission today. We are projecting by 2030, it'll be over 1 billion tons. We are adding, by 2030, supposed to add about $500 billion to global GDP, employing 3-4 million people across the world, which I think is an understated figure. I think if you take all the ancillary industry together, it'll be much more. So it's a huge industry making a huge contribution. So I said, we really need to bring them together. One thing that I always counter myself by saying that, yes, we are trying to reduce pollution, but pollutants don't need a passport or a visa to travel from across Africa to come to this side of France or Morocco to this side of Europe. So if Europeans are very good at it, we have done the best recycling systems, we are very carbon sensitive, we have reduced our carbon, but we cannot protect our stratosphere, because pollutants will still come in or be blown over from across the sea from other continents, because they don't need any visa to travel. So really, it's very important that we do equal amount of work on the other side of the world as we do here. So I then decided Global Recycling Day will help me to connect with all these people across the world, share some resources with them, my knowledge with them, our knowledge with them, and hopefully we can make the world a little bit more better place to live for our children, reduce the pollution, and together maybe we can fight the global climate crisis. So that's really little story behind what made me do Global Recycling Day. Other than that, I think let's be open to your next program, Zoe.
Thanks so much, Ranjit. No, it's really, really interesting. And I think that, it's such a good idea getting a Global Recycling Day. You've, in just a few years, you've managed to mobilize people from literally all over the world, haven't you? I know you had an early start this morning as well, speaking to various media outlets, haven't you?
No, yeah, but I mean, as I said, they all ask me, it's too early in the morning. And I always said, well, I'm thankful somebody like you, Zoe, for making the effort to do this, because every one converted citizen on planet Earth can make a big difference. And as I always say, no matter small or big, we all can make the difference. So I'm always there to give my time. And if people like you, Zoe, are doing so much, I think I'm doing very little.
No, not at all. Well, it takes all of us doing our own thing, doesn't it? So, no, really, really grateful to you for joining us here today as well. So I'm going to move on to discussing a little bit about this, the key themes that we pulled out in this recycling and untold story. So first of all, let's focus on climate change, because it really is the topic of the day, isn't it, or of the moment. Obviously in the UK, we have COP26 coming up, which is a big international event, lots and lots of focus on climate change. There's an interesting fact that I discovered recently. I mean, your figure there about how much carbon, carbon emissions recycling saves each year that's a phenomenal amount. But then if we look at, across the lower income countries around the world, where 90% of waste is just completely mismanaged at the moment, and so much of it is burnt in the open because there's no alternative. Either you dump it and it accumulates, or ultimately set fire to it to make it go away. Now, one that I became aware of recently is the amount of carbon that's emitted from open burning, and it was so much more than I expected. Now, obviously, the data is very poor, because how do you measure the carbon coming? Somebody's burning their rubbish in their backyard, or a dump site sets on fire and you lose maybe, I don't know, 30 cubic meters, but you don't know what materials are there, you don't know what temperature it's burned at. So it's very, very difficult to estimate the actual emissions coming from that. But some clever academics have, sort of worked on lots of data around this and come to the conclusion that open burning generates between 2 and 10% of global climate emissions, which is a phenomenal figure considering that aviation is only 5%. And the amount of attention and finance that is going on decarbonising aviation, and what we really need is for politicians and decision makers around the world to recognise the importance of waste management for climate change, to reduce climate emissions and help build climate resilience. So Ranjit, do you have, in terms of the impacts of, the climate, the carbon savings for recycling? I mean, your background is in the metals recycling sector, is that correct?
Metal and paper.
Okay.
And a little bit of plastic as well. So therefore I...
Bit of everything, good stuff. Yeah. And it's, I did think that, maybe moving, maybe shipping all these materials around the world is actually having that's going to have a negative carbon impact. However, it's still so worth it when you look at the savings made from actually recycling the material, isn't it?
I mean, Zoe, look at UK. We collect close to 10 million tons of recovered fiber, what's known as waste paper. And we call it recovered fiber. I don't like to use the word waste. Now, of the 10 million tons approximately collected in UK between 9.5, 9.6, because of this COVID, most European countries are down by 10 to 15% at the moment in their collections. So even if we collected 8.5 million, UK as a country cannot use all 8 or 9 million tons of fiber that we collect. We can hardly manage to use 5 million. So we'll have a surplus of 4 million plus within the United Kingdom. So if UK didn't export this fiber, it'd probably end up going into landfills or end up for burning. So really, it's very important that we do not let it to be burned. We extend the life cycle of the fiber by exporting it and having it be used in a country where if this fiber didn't arrive there, they would probably go and use virgin pulp, which is going to be deforestation, cutting more trees. So it's making a big contribution. So we need to export it. So it's a necessity. Same is in metal, I think, and same is in plastic. You mentioned about open burning. I mean, I was reading an article the other day which said that e-waste, which is growing at an aggressive rate, and there is not enough facilities across the world which are able to systematically, in a better way, deal and refine the e-waste from computers to washing machines to your telephones and so on and so forth. So the open burning of e-waste alone, they are saying, is generating or adding over 100 million tons of carbon emission, just burning of e-waste. So you can imagine all the other sectors that you've talked about. There'll be plastic, there'll be whatever else. So it's a huge necessity for us to make sure that there is growth in e-waste, there's growth in ability to handle e-waste, there is more advanced technologies shared around the world, so they are dealt with properly. Those precious earth metals are recovered properly, gold, platinum, whatever else is in there. And until we do this in an organized way, we won't really benefit the system. So what you are saying, Zoe, is so perfect. I mean, on COP26, I issued a press release, I'm sure you are doing the same, 2-3 days ago, where I'm asking that why is recycling not at the forefront of the COP26 agenda? I have been to Morocco, most COP26 meetings, trying to create a need for them to appreciate and understand that recycling is not such a populistic story for politicians and legislators to talk about. They probably love to talk about solar panels, electrical cars, incineration plants. We are probably not fashionable subject, but for God's sake, we are saving so much carbon emission. The airline industry probably adds 500 million. And we are projected to save 1 billion tons of CO2 emission. It's a huge contribution. So we should be somewhere in there, but we are nowhere. So I issued a press release only 2 days ago, which again was picked up by the press, but not by the COP26 organizers. But I hope someday this industry gets its right place within the political circles and within the business world. I mean, reforestations and all these things are talked about, trillion trees and this trees and that trees, but the recycling is not talked about. So Zoe, I'm sure you have done the same. I don't know if you have done anything on the subject, you can also share.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks Ranjit. So we've at WasteAid, we've been working with a cross-sector group of specialists, so some academics, some practitioners, some people in the UN and the Climate Change and Clean Air Coalition, trying to work out this year we've got a big opportunity to get waste and recycling in front of these climate change decision makers at COP26, and we're going to be giving it all that we've got to get waste onto the agenda, because it presents such an opportunity, and like you keep saying, it's just massively overlooked. Okay, they might not find it attractive enough. I think it's wildly attractive. There's just so many benefits. There's so many different angles to it. Like you said, with the paper recycling, we can reduce deforestation. We can prevent the marine plastic pollution. I see Cressida barriers here in the chat, pointing out as well about the multiple health impacts from open burning, and therefore the potential health benefits to society of getting that waste management right. And of course, the way to get it right is through through separating the materials and getting them back into the recycling chain, so you can start making money from it and building sustainable long-term systems. We do quite a lot of work in the Gambia, and the mayor of the capital city there recently told me they did a drain clearing exercise because the drains of the city get so full typically of plastic waste, and the numbers of malaria that year almost halved in the city. There's so many knock-on impacts. Also the flash floods, where when the rains come and the drains are blocked, and you end up with flash floods pouring filthy water into people's homes, and the spread of cholera and other waterborne diseases is a huge human cost, as well as the cost to the public purse. So I really think that recycling is a win-win-win for policymakers.
I mean, it's a really big story, and I hope our efforts, combined efforts today and many more across the world, will probably bring the message home. If not, we'll have to go and sit in our cars outside COP26 with a banner outside. Recycling is here. Like it or not like it.
I guess we should go by public transport. Great. Okay, so let's move on to the sustainable livelihoods aspect of recycling. Then, I mean, you must for Global Recycling Day, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about this, please. You spend time identifying recycling champions around the world, don't you? Are these people that are creating, job opportunities, building businesses in recycling? Can you tell us a bit about them?
What happened is, I mean, as I said, untold story, trying to share and connect with more and more people. So I said, look, if I can start this little competition around the world and ask people to nominate their recycling hero. And what I really meant when I said that is, I think there are a lot of unsung heroes within our communities, within our townships, within our villages and cities, who have done a lot of good work just to raise the awareness, because I think the biggest challenge in recycling is education and awareness. I think if we can educate the mass society, media, into understanding that what recycling is all about, what happens to the plastic bottle that you throw in your dustbin, not segregating it into the right bin, where it'll end, and if you put in the right bin, where it'll go, what will happen to it, it'll come back as a new bottle, and what jobs and energy savings and carbon savings you are making, not for yourself, but for the future of your children. I say to people sometimes, where I have a sort of audience who really wants to know a little bit more, and they say, no, we don't agree with that. I say, look, what is a mountain of waste, a landfill? What you are doing in the West Mountains, you are putting all sorts of chemical, non-chemical, toxic, non-toxic waste piling up there for years and years. That mountain stays there. Eventually, with rainwater and other things going through it, and various chemical reactions taking place over 10, 20 years, you find toxins leaching out of that West Mountains into the surface underneath, and eventually it connects with the water table underneath. And once those toxins have gone into the water table, that water table travels down from there, maybe for many miles down the road, and is probably affecting crop in a farm 100 miles away from there, all coming from this West Mountain. But neither does the farmer know, nor anybody else knows, but some of these crops can be carcinogenic, because some of the toxins coming out of West Mountains can be quite killers, mountains that are there for 20, 30 years. So I have sort of talked about this and said, look, West Mountains are a killer. They are a negative, they are a non-plus. We need to get rid of them. Whatever are there. Let's not add to it. How can we stop adding to it? Plastic, going into the oceans. We cannot just spend millions of dollars just recovering what is there, but at least let's spend today's money to stop more going there. If we can stop more going there, at least we then can start thinking of recovering what is there. So again, you have to incentivize people. You have to give people what is the benefit, what's the money, what's the value in what they are doing. I was working in 1 or 2 countries with some local communities, and I went to explain to them at great length that if you are able to get better value out of what you are doing, and there's a system within your country that can use your material properly, or trade or export, you have a hub which is getting and exporting, like Nigerians now are very clever, they're even exporting some of the stuff, then there's a lot of value. And everybody down the value chain becomes a winner. And as you said, if it's win-win for all, then their lifestyle becomes better, the children's health become better. I've told communities from the money, they can probably build little dispensaries. From the waste they generate revenue, they can build, buy computers for the kids in the schools, at the local schools. I was speaking to somebody in Australia the other night, 2 weeks ago, she wanted to discuss about GRD and what could she be doing. And I told her exactly that. I said, look, if you are collecting this, why don't you bring schools together and just collect old telephones, for example. And from the old telephones that you collect, you can be raising money for this. So I was really trying to say that I wanted to identify people who are doing this kind of things and highlight them across the world so that they can inspire other young leaders. Because the challenge to me today is not changing you and me, Zoe, more. It's really changing the youth of today, the young upcoming youth. If we can educate them, because I was born in Africa. The school where I went to in Africa, the word recycling, environment, climate change didn't even exist. Even today, many schools don't talk about it. So if we can inspire those youth into understanding the value of the environment, what contributions they can make, what part they should be playing, so we already have converted leaders of tomorrow. So my aim is really to identify the recycling heroes. But coming back to what you said, this year, I've been so surprised. I've got a lot of medium-sized corporate entries who are now saying that we are doing sustainable work as well. We need to be recognized as recycling heroes as well. And some of them really, I've read, we had quite a lot of entries, and I was reading there, some of them even till last night, just making my mind, really he deserves it. But then somebody, it's been a very difficult year for me to find just 10 out of this big pile, because now the corporate world is also recognizing that what Zoe has been saying over all these years is very important, and we are playing an important part, and we need to be recognized. So I'm really pleased that it has caught up in the moment that it deserves to be in. So hopefully it'll benefit us all.
That's brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Ranjit. And yeah, I think I've seen, and particularly over the last couple of years, I would say, these big companies really getting on board. I mean, obviously you can't change a packaging, packaging choice overnight. It can take a lot of investment and research to get it right. But I've been really, really heartened, I have to say, by the number of, particularly these really large multinational companies, whether they're from the plastics sector or making the packaging, or, they're brands and retailers, the way that everyone is starting to really work together to make change happen. It's been really, really reassuring, I would say. Obviously, we'd like everything to happen faster, but that's life. And I think, particularly partnerships as well between NGOs like WasteAid and corporate sponsors. We've got Huhtamaki sponsoring our circular economy network. We've been working with Bunzel as well. They're sponsoring some of our work in Cameroon, which is fantastic, and that's making a big difference. And I think there's a lot of scope to scale those sorts of interventions where by working in partnership, we all recognise the same ultimate goals: to keep resources in the loop, prevent them from becoming pollution, and provide sustainable livelihoods in the process is definitely the way forward. And what you said there about education and awareness as well, I think is so important. It does quite a lot of training and capacity building in lower income countries with sort of community champions, as well as with municipalities and other businesses and so on. And I think that's really key. First of all, for people to be able to gather the evidence that they need in the local context to be able to influence decision makers, and then to know how to go about that whole process. What steps do you take to start implementing better waste management in your community, in your town, whatever? So yeah, there's a lot to be done still around education and awareness. But I think one good thing that's come from this year and everybody being stuck at home is that we have started talking more on webinars like this and sharing ideas across continents and so on. And that's been I suppose one positive. Somebody put in the comments as well about just to really recognise the heroes that have been working in waste through this COVID pandemic, and how they've managed to keep things going and keep their cities clean. And they've, I just want to say a big, huge well done to everybody there, everybody that's been doing their bit to keep things going, and keep cities clean and stop waste from and recovering that value for society is such an important role. And it's very overlooked, isn't it? A lot of the time, under-recognised, let's say. So again, another great reason for Global Recycling Day, and to recognise those champions wherever they are, in whatever role they're filling in the recycling sector.
I mean, Zoe, to be very honest, 10 is so little compared to, one person I've chosen, he's a retired activist, and he's spending his life into, we will probably be releasing those names tomorrow, because I'm so busy with so many interviews today. But he's spending his time after retirement just for the good of environment. And very simple thing compared to what some other big company could be doing before, much sort of bigger picture at a much higher, bigger scale. But I think I like this simple job done by a simple human being, which goes to say to the story that, look, doesn't matter what little you are doing, but you are making a big difference in a big system. So, you know, who do you give? Do you give this guy an award, or do you give somebody else who is converting PET bottles into some useful raw material and then helping community to collect back, which is also very important. So I feel 10 is too little. I should be really looking to give 25 maybe next year. But the message is what you've said, Zoe. The biggest message I find is work of WasteAid and so many other NGOs around the world is helping Global Recycling Day to bring the subject of recycling on the forefront. Whether COP26 likes it or doesn't like it, maybe COP27 will like it, but the day is not far when we will be on the table where we should be, and we should be telling our story and loudly from the rooftop so everybody can really join in, because the environment is for everybody else. You know, I mean, you know, in one year of helping to reduce climate carbon dioxide emission, you don't know how many millions of people you are benefiting in health terms. You know, people get asthma, people get this, people get that. It can't be quantified. So, no, we are doing a big social impact exercise as well for the well-being of the society. So it's a great industry. It needs to be recognized.
Absolutely, yeah, couldn't agree more, obviously. And I think as well, you know, when, like you said, the health impacts, they can be very, very difficult to directly attribute to poorly managed waste, because quite often in places that don't have a waste management service, there's lots of other reasons, you know, poor nutrition or whatever, you know, bad air quality caused by things other than waste burning as well. So it can be difficult to really draw that evidence, you know, and make it kind of hard and fast to convince decision makers. But I think that evidence is growing, and I think that the more that we work together across borders and across continents and across sectors as well, to start really gathering that data, agreeing on, you know, shared methodologies, so that when we, you know, so that whatever, a city in India can be compared to a city in Nigeria, to somewhere in Cameroon, for example, and we can really start to build a much clearer picture of the negative impacts of not getting it sorted, and therefore the positive impacts. I mean, you know, to you and I, Ranjit, it's a no-brainer, and I'm sure to many people that are joining us here today as well. But you know, there's still quite a lot of work to push it up the agenda, as you were saying. It's interesting to see the comments that we have here. Thank you to everybody who has joined us. We have people working to recover and recycle ocean plastic, people working on waste electrical and electronic equipment in Kenya, looking at carbon credits, people wanting to recognise waste pickers and the junk shops, that, you know, the first step of that value chain, you know, really, really important role. And what do you think, Ranjit? Is there one, I mean, it might be an impossible question, but is there, you know, if you could pick one, you know, topic to really drive this year? So we know that obviously climate change is a huge theme. Is there one area in particular where you think to be putting our focus and investment and attention to help reduce climate emissions and the other negative impacts of waste, and to help get it back into the recycling chain?
I mean, I would say let's pick up the easy, low-hanging fruits. And what you are doing, really, you are doing picking of those fruits by going to Cameroon, going here, and, you know, other markets. I think I mean, I was in Ghana about 15 months ago, and when you leave Accra, the outskirts of Accra is terrible with so much waste there. I mean, something needs to be done about it. So I think if we can just try to harness very simple, easy material that is not going down the waste channel, creating a channel, bringing, you know, your model of public-private partnership is the answer. So we try to look at very simple, low-hanging fruits, be it collecting waste paper or newspapers, aluminium cans, you know, which is sold at quite a high price. Any simple things, like a community collection system. If we can start building that across African countries, but create employment with it. So if we collect plastic, I think you have the same model. You link that plastic into a granulating business. And so you add value to the waste that is collected. So there is more better value for people, better jobs, and you're helping to change and bring up the African economy, because Africa is going to be a big push of young people coming up. About 10 to 15 million young people will be joining the labor market every year over the next 2-3 decades. So you've got about 500 million people coming into the mainstream in the next 20-30 years. So they need jobs, and they'll be intelligent, they're all qualified, educated people. So I think if you can create some small industries linked to the waste, and the easy ones, which are easy to pick, easy to treat, and create an end product which has a market, then I think you are winning the game.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I've seen, there's some absolutely brilliant businesses starting up, all around Africa, actually. It's really, really exciting to see in that space at the moment. So we've got the collection, we've got the reprocessing. Now, how do we get those markets strengthened? Do you think that, obviously we're seeing extended producer responsibility start to, really emerge in some countries? Do you think that that's where the biggest potential lies, maybe in sort of encouraging or even enforcing companies to purchase recycled content, to use in their new products and packaging?
Well, so certainly, you see, I mean, all the effort, the primary effort of collecting, sorting, baling, creating a seventh resource of the highest quality, minimum contamination, everything is fantastic. But there has to be demand. Demand can only be created if these companies agree to use more and more. At the moment, you've got a lot of soft drink companies making big announcements that we will be using 25%, we'll be using 50% of the PET regrind granules to make PET bottles, which is all very fine. But on the other hand, I'm also learning that there is not enough plastic regrind granules available for them. So the price for the granules also has been shooting up very rapidly because there is not enough supply. So which really means there's not enough investment. I mean, should the government be helping in recycling industry to make investment? Should there be more grants? Should there be some tax benefits for people to go and use the recyclable waste and convert into a byproduct which becomes a product for developing by some other industry? There should be some incentive. If you incentivize industry more, then people will not stop just at collecting and sorting waste. They probably will go the extra mile because they'll be creating value to it, whether it's in UK, in Malawi, in Germany, anywhere. So the demand has to be there, and investment has to be there. If people are not making investment, the question that government is going to ask why. If it is because it doesn't pay enough, then there has to be some other incentives, be it grants, be it tax advantage, be it 5 years, special kind of tax benefit for that amount, that kind of industry which is using so much secondary, so much scrap material to create secondary raw material. I mean, there has to be something like that. And if you look into emerging economies, Africa, India, and other countries, I think they need to have much bigger incentive. I mean, I go so far that all these big countries are giving international aid, like UK was 0.7%. I think it is time at COP26, they should make a declaration that all the international aid, X percentage of every country's declaration aid must be directly linked to a green sustainable project. Then this industry will survive because the aid money can go in there. At the moment, you're giving aid to build, I don't know, motor car industry, another steel plant or whatever. But I think we should be supporting with aid for green sustainable project. That'll really help a lot of countries make big investments and big progress.
I love that idea. I think that's a superb idea. Definitely, we should table that. I always think as well, like, people that are doing their best to set up a recycling business in a country where you don't have that supporting, that enabling environment is so challenging. Like it's challenging enough to set up a recycling business in the UK, for example, where we have supportive legislation and regulation. We have, tax incentives and so on. We have, the professional associations for waste managers. events, magazines, and all this, you know, all this really helpful stuff going on. But if you're in a country where that kind of activity is very scant and very few and far between, it can be really even more challenging, can't it, to make recycling work economically. So what advice do you have for people wanting to set up a recycling business in that kind of context?
When I was, 2014, I launched my first book, Recycling Our Future. In that book, in the last paragraph of the book, I said a way for recycling to succeed is the necessity for all these countries to create eco-hubs or eco-parks, as many people call it. And an eco-hub becomes like a substation where you are able to collect material, because the arising of the material in Lagos might be very strong in Nigeria, but outside Lagos, you go to another city, the collection rate has dropped down because of whatever reasons. So when you create eco-hubs, 4 or 5, and in the middle of the eco-hubs, within say 100-mile radius, you then create a recycling plant, because the success of a recycling plant is getting raw material or the furnished to run the plant. And the success of a factory is to be able to get, again, the furnished, the input, which is, waste paper, clean, contaminated, recovered fiber, uncontaminated, recovered fiber, or steel scrap as input to run a steel mill. So therefore, it's very important we have lots of eco-hubs across various countries, which is receiving and sorting different kinds of scrap into different kinds of raw material. And all these eco-hubs in turn work together to supply or feed into one recycling plant. Another big mistake we are making all over the world is you end up setting up big plants. If you set up a plant to make, 20,000 ton of steel plastic scrap input, or 10,000 ton of plastic scrap input. The problem of getting 10,000 ton is so far that if you set up a plant in London, you might have to bring in your raw material from as far as Glasgow to London so that you can process it to make what you want to make. Why don't we make smaller plants, but multiple plants across the country, so we reduce our carbon footprint of logistics, we support the industry well as we allow the group to go.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that decentralized waste and resource management systems are definitely, they have so many benefits over big centralized kind of, one large incinerator, or you could have a decentralized system where you're providing employment for so many more people, as well as keeping those materials in the loop, which is what provides that value that people then get their living from. So absolutely, yeah, completely agree. Look, we're running out of time, but there's some really interesting questions. Thank you everybody for joining us and for providing your contributions. I was thinking we are scheduled to end at 15:15, but if you would like to join us for a bit more of a debate on LinkedIn, then come on over. I'll be manning the WasteAid channel on LinkedIn and on Twitter this afternoon. So if you would like to, to keep talking with us, keep connecting, if you've got ideas or questions, then, please feel free to get in touch. Ranjit, I don't know how I imagine you've got quite a busy afternoon still. That's the problem when you run a global recycling day, you have to be up all day, huh?
No, but I'm so pleased, we are getting to where we want to be.
Yeah. Slowly, step by step, we'll get there. And year by year with Global Recycling Day, hopefully, I imagine it's definitely a growing movement, isn't it? So let's hope it continues to snowball.
One thing is, as I come from Tanzania, from Africa, one thing I'm really pleased. So many African countries not only have nominated recycling heroes, but so many of them are waking up to the concept that recycling has got to be central to the well-being of their communities. And so much, young, university youth and other young people, they run their campaigns to drive the city clean, their towns clean. I really applaud all the Africans across Africa for what suddenly they are doing, and they're really waking up to recycling in a very big way. So we'll see Africa leading the world maybe the next decade.
Absolutely. And next year it's COP27 in Africa. So really looking forward to that. Yeah. We're just going to keep building the momentum. And, if we don't get it on the table this time around, we'll go next year. Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant. Okay, look, Ranjit, I'm going to wrap it up here because I'm conscious that people probably have other things to get to as well. But thank you so much for joining us. Many congratulations on, you know, the brilliant work that you've been doing with Global Recycling Day and, you know, recognizing all those champions around the world. You know, really good to connect with you. I think that, you know, WasteAid and Global Recycling Foundation, we've obviously got very aligned goals, and you know, to people listening in, like when Ranjit and I spoke for the first time a couple of days ago, we were definitely you know, going to be long-term friends. So very much looking forward to working with you over the coming years, and seeing what we can do to really raise recycling up the international agenda.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you to all the listeners. Thank you, Michelle, for all your work as well.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Thanks a lot. Okay, thanks everybody. Very much appreciate you joining, and I'll be over on LinkedIn and Twitter. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.